Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Landscape Photography Processing. My name's Ian. In this episode I want to show you how I prepare my photographs for posting on the internet. So many things like Facebook and other social media sites. In particular, what I want to show you to do is create an action. So whenever you've got something you want to post on the internet, so whether you've got multiple images you want to process for putting online, or if you come to the end of your workflow and you very quickly want to create a final result that you can post online, you can do this very much at a touch of a button. So if you haven't heard of actions before, what an action is basically it's a list of commands that you tell Photoshop to do automatically. So you press a button, it runs through the commands and outspits a final image, final result at the end of that. So it's essentially like a preset, but works in a slightly different way. So let me show you what I mean. So if we go to our actions panel, you'll probably usually find it on the right hand side, sort of this play symbol here. So if I click on mine, I've got tons of actions that I've created and acquired over the years that I use in various circumstances. If you can't see this panel here, if you just go to Window and just click on Actions here, and that should bring up your Actions panel. You should find it there. So let me show you the action that I use for preparing my image for the internet. So before we create our own, I'll show you what I do as standard. So here I've got an image that I've already processed, comes in my workflow. I've flattened it down. And if I just click on this action here, and it will run through all these commands, create a load of new layers, and there you go, outspits a file that's prepared for the internet. All it needs to do is now save that as a JPEG and post it online. So it's gone through that automatically for me. So what have I done? I'll just talk you through. So I've got my background layer here. Next thing I've done here is I've got a layer of sharpening, because we've reduced the image in size. I find when you reduce things in size, you lose a little bit of sharpness. So I'll just put that back in to compensate for that. I've also created a hue saturation adjustment layer just to resaturate it slightly. Again, I find when you reduce things in size, you lose a little bit of saturation. Plus also, if you're posting on the internet, people are going to be looking at these your images on all sorts of different devices like phones, tablets, computer screens. They all are set in slightly different ways, and I find I just like my images to be just slightly oversaturated and slightly undersaturated. So I just add a little bit of saturation in here. And the final thing I do is I've put my watermark here. So just turn the opacity up here. So it's just my copyright, and then my website address and my Facebook address here. Now I'm not going to show you how to create this watermark in this video. I've used a technique that I found another photographer put it online, and I'll post a link to the video in the description of this video. It's by a chap called Sean Bagshaw. If you've not heard of Sean, fantastic landscape photographer based over in I think he's on the west coast of the States, but he does a lot of luminosity masking, goes some real in-depth stuff with the Tony Kuiper actions panels and things like that. So if you haven't checked out his channel, please do, because there's some great stuff on there. But he's got a particular video where he shows you how to create a watermark and put it in exactly the same place every single time on whatever image you're working on. So like I said, I put a link to that in the description of this video. So right, let's go about creating our own actions. So let me just go back and go back to my original opened image here. So first thing I want to do is, if you haven't got a group for your actions, is just create a new group here. So if you click on this folder icon, and that should create a group. Name it what you want. I've named it, in this case, My Actions. And the next thing we'll do is create an action. So a new action, you want to click on this bit of paper with a bit folded over icon. Set the same icon as new layer down on the bottom right. So if you just click on that, and that brings up your new action box here. So I'm just going to rename this something functional like internet prep, something like that. And next to do is click record. So you should see this button should turn red, and everything you do from now on, it will be recorded in this action. So any adjustments you make, any new layers you create, anything like that will be recorded in this action, so you can use it at a later date. So first thing I want to do is, well, what you want to do is flatten your image. If you work on an image with multiple layers, you want to go down to Layer, Flatten Image. But what I want to do here, because that will bring up an error if I try and use that action on something that's already been flattened, just to make sure we're not going to get any errors, I'm just going to create a new layer, just a blank layer, don't need to rename it anything, and then just go down to Layer, Flatten Image. And there we go. So you should have just your background layer, but by using that in the action, if you have got a lot of layers, that means you're working with just a background layer. Next thing we'll do is we resize this. So I'm going to Image, image size. First thing I'm going to do is change my resolution to 72 pixels per inch. That's a fairly standard resolution for what you see JPEGs, things going on the internet. Next thing I'll do is change your longest side. So if you're working landscape orientation, you want to change your width to 2048. Now the size of this is up to you, but many years ago I read a few articles that said that 2048 was the optimum width size or size for your longest edge for uploading to Facebook. So when you put things on Facebook, Facebook uses its own algorithms for it, basically reprocesses your picture for you. So it resizes it, resamples it, it sharpens it slightly, does all sorts. Which is why you find sometimes when you put things on Facebook, they come look a bit off. You get sort of banding and all sort of compression issues and things like that. But like I said, I found that 2048 works pretty well. I've also found that 1024 works pretty well, but because I like to upload things on the internet in pretty high resolution, I go for 2048. So make sure it's 2048, 72 dpi, and your resample I've chosen bicubic sharpener reduction because we're reducing the image in size. And just make sure your little chain icon here is clicked, so everything is all the proportions are constrained and right. So just want to click OK. And that should resize our image down slightly. So I'm just going to zoom back in here. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to go to image mode and 8-bit. Again, most things you find on the internet will be 8-bit resolution. I tend to work in 16-bit when I'm processing. There's tons of information, but when you've got your finished image, just change it down to 8-bit. It reduces the file size by half as well, so you can save a lot more. The next thing I want to do is I want to change the color space. So as a standard, my camera shoots in Adobe RGB. Some people have ProPhoto RGB, but what a color space is, it's just a range of colors that are represented in your image. Most things on the internet, most displays, screens, web browsers, anything like that will use the sRGB color space, which is a much smaller color space, but it's much easier for websites and things like that to read and show accurately. So the way you want to do is I'm going to go down to edit, I'm going to choose convert to profile, and you see our source space. I'm currently working in Adobe RGB. Destination space, you should have a load of color profiles here. You want to find sRGB, click on it and click OK. Now if you don't do this step, because all color spaces are slightly different, you'll find that maybe if you put something on the internet, the colors might seem a little bit off, but by putting it in sRGB, you're making sure that your document is converted into the color space that is the most widely used on the internet. So next thing I want to do is I want to do my sharpening. So if you select your background layer, and I'm going to duplicate that by pressing Control or Command if you're on a Mac and J, and that should bring up a new layer here. I'm going to rename that, so double click on it, rename that to Sharpen. Now the filter I'm going to use when I'm sharpening is Unsharp Mask. Sometimes I use the high pass filter, but in this case I'm just going to go with a mild Unsharp Mask. So Sharpen, Unsharp Mask. The amounts here I've got, we don't want to do too much, so if you just want to check your preview window, so I've just got amount 100, radius 1, threshold usually between sort of 10 and 15 works sort of fairly. I'm going to keep it at 10. So I'm just going to do that, click OK. And if we zoom in, just go to 100% and go on and off, you see that this has been sharpened. Now I've already applied sharpening as part of my general workflow. So I don't want to me this is now over sharpened. So what I want to do is just drop my opacity of this layer down to, I don't know, around about 30%, something like that. So it's just that, you probably won't even see it on the video now, but it's just a mild sharpening that I've added there. So the next thing, I want to add a little bit of saturation back. So I'm going to go to my adjustment layers, hue saturation, and I just want to add just a little bit on the master channel. So maybe 4 or 5, yeah, maybe about 5, just to bring just a little tad of saturation there. You don't want to go too far on that layer. And that's pretty much it. That's apart from adding my my watermark, that's the process I use for converting things to put on the internet. So if you go back to your action and you click the black box, the stop button, And there you go. So that's stopped recording anything we do, and now everything in there has been saved, and we can run that on future images. So I'll show you what I mean. Let's just go back to our history tab and just go to our zoomed in a bit too far, to our original open document there, and zoom back out. If you go back to actions, select your internet prep, click the play button, and that should now run through all the steps that we've just done. Simple as that. So if you've got any images you want to do, just open them up in Photoshop, click the internet prep action or whatever you've called it, and that should run through everything automatically. Now the great thing about these actions is if you want to add anything onto them, you can do it very, very easily. So for example, if you're posting things on the internet and they're coming out either maybe brighter or darker or slightly differently to how you expect, you can go back in and add some more steps to your action without having to go through all the steps again. So for example, if things are coming out darker than I want them to when I post the internet, what I can do is let's just select our internet prep action. Let's just expand it. So clicking that little on so it's pointing downwards. And here we've got all our different stages of commands. What you do is select the very last thing on the list. So in this case, set current adjustment layer, and just click record. And now anything from here on will be added on to your action. So again, like I was saying, things coming out a little bit too dark. I want to create a curves adjustment layer, for example. I want to take my curve and just brighten things up a little bit. Maybe that's a bit too far, but maybe about there. Get rid of that and just press stop. And that has added that on to the end of our action. So just to demonstrate again, let me go up to our unopened image here. I'm going to scroll up to our internet prep action, press play, and you should see it goes through all our steps and then sticks a curves adjustment layer on top, which is great. So you can do whatever you want to these, so just fine tune it to how you want your images to look when you upload them onto the internet. Next thing I do when I'm saving down, I'll usually use the file export save for web. If you're using older versions of Photoshop, you might find it on the main list, but I'm just very used to this, how I've always saved things for web, so why change it? So save for web, legacy, and then it brings up a box here. So I usually choose JPEG, quality 100, maximum quality, and just leave all the other settings. You've got sRGB, and just click save, choose the folder that you're saving it to, and there you go, you're ready to post on the internet. So let's just press cancel. So what happens if you've got an image that is portrait orientation? Just got such an image here. So if you're going to do this, let's just run this, and you'll find that it's actually making the image a lot bigger than it should be, and that's because it's resized 2048 along the top edge, which is the width. We don't want this, we want the long edge, which is the height this time, to be 2048. Now what you need to do is create a new action, but you don't need to go through all the other steps that we've already just done, and I'll show you what I mean. So let's just go back to our original image here. So we're going to create new action, new actions button. I'm going to call this internet prep. I'm going to call this portrait, just so I can tell the difference in the two. Click record. Now we just want to do the first few steps as we did before. So I'm going to create new layer, and I go to layer, flatten image. So we created a new layer, flattened it just to get around all the flattening errors you might get if you're just working on a base layer. And then we're going to do our image sizing again. So image size, I'm going to change our resolution to 72 dpi, and this time round I want to pick height to be 2048, bicubic sharpener reduction, click OK, and that should resize our picture nicely. Now if you go to your original internet prep action, expand it here, and you just want to skip the bits that we've already done. So we've already done make layer, we've already done flatten image, we've already done image size, but from here on we want to just run the action as it was. So if you just press convert mode, which was converting to 8-bit, and just press play, that should just run through all our other steps. So what essentially we've done, we've got an action within an action, which is great, really useful thing to do. So we don't need to mess about with doing all the other steps from scratch again. Just play what you've done before. As long as you start it in the right place, it should do that. So let me just go back to actually before we do that, first thing you do is stop the action. So press the stop button there, going to go back to our open image, click our Internet Prep portrait, run that, press play, and there we go. And if we look at our image size, our height is 2048. And there we go. I hope you found that useful. If you did, please do like and subscribe. It's much appreciated. Welcome any comments you might have. And I will see you again very shortly in a next video. Cheers. Bye-bye.